It was a Tuesday night in late November, and I was sitting at my kitchen table in my condo in Calgary, still in my scrubs, eating cold leftover butter chicken straight from the container, when my phone buzzed with an email notification I almost ignored. The subject line was 5 words. Notice of default. Immediate action required. I put down the fork. I opened it. It was from a commercial lender I had never heard of, a private lending group based in Toronto. The email was dense with legal language, but 2 things cut through everything else, like a blade through tissue. The first was my name, Claire, listed as co-guarantor on a commercial property loan. The second was the number, $385,000 CAT 5,000 called. Outstanding. In default. My stomach dropped. I am a registered nurse practitioner. I work 60-hour weeks at a busy hospital in Calgary. I run a tight budget. I do not have a $385,000 commercial loan. I have never signed anything close to that. I have never even owned investment property. But according to this document, I had. I read the email again, then a third time. The lender was referencing a small commercial unit in Mississauga, Ontario, a retail space. According to the terms, the loan had been taken out 18 months ago. My name was on the guarantor line, my SIN number, my date of birth, my former address in Brampton, the house I had grown up in and left behind at 22. I pushed back from the table. I walked to my bathroom. I ran cold water over my wrists the way I do after long shifts when I can feel my hands starting to shake. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. Have you ever had that moment where you understand something completely? Not with your brain, but with your body. A deep, sickening recognition in your gut before your mind has caught up? I had it right then. Standing in my bathroom at 10 p.m. on a Tuesday, I already knew who had done this. I just didn't want to be right. I went back to my laptop. I pulled up my credit report to Equifax. It loaded slowly. I watched the screen. There were 3 accounts I didn't recognize. The commercial loan, a line of credit opened 2 years ago in Burlington. A second line of credit opened in my name at a credit union in Brampton 8 months ago, already showing a balance of $37,000 in total fraudulent debt tied to my identity. My SIN, my name, my credit score, which had quietly been bleeding out for 2 years while I was in Calgary saving lives, had no idea. My phone lit up on the table. A text from my mother. Hey, sweetheart. Hope work was okay. Did you end up getting that thing from the bank sorted out? Donna said she mentioned it to you. It's really not a big deal. It's just paperwork. Call me when you get a chance. Love you. I read it twice. Then I put the phone face down on the table. Donna is my older sister. She is 34. She has never held a job longer than 8 months. She has 3 failed business ventures behind her, all of which my mother described at the time as bad luck. She lives in the house I grew up in the basement suite my mother renovated. Renovated with money I had sent home every month for 3 years, under the assumption it was going toward property tax and utilities. It's really not a big deal. It's just paperwork. $432,000. My credit history, my professional standing, my nursing license, which in Alberta is tied to a standards of fitness review that includes financial conduct, meaning a commercial default of this size, if it went to judgment, could be flagged to my regulatory college. Not a big deal. Just paperwork. I didn't cry. I have spent years training myself not to cry in moments of crisis. In the ICU, you do not cry when the numbers go wrong. You move. You call the right people. You act before the window closes. I picked up my phone. I did not call my mother. I called Marcus. Marcus is not a general practice lawyer. He is a civil litigation and fraud specialist in Calgary. I met him 3 years ago when a colleague of mine had her identity stolen, and Marcus rebuilt her entire financial life in 4 months. He is methodical, quiet, and when he is focused, he uses a tone of voice that sounds almost gentle, which is the most deceptive thing about him. Because that voice has destroyed people in courtrooms, he answered on the 3rd ring. Claire, it's late. I know, I said. I have a situation. I told him everything. The default notice, the credit lines, the amounts. He didn't interrupt. By the time I finished, I could hear him typing. I need your credit report and both default notices sent to me tonight, he said. I'll request an emergency credit freeze on all 3 bureaus first thing tomorrow. I also want to file a police report for identity fraud before 9 a.m. That timestamp matters for what comes next. What comes next? I asked. That depends, he said. Do you know who did this? I was quiet for a moment. I have a strong suspicion. Then we document the suspicion carefully, he said. Don't contact them. Don't respond to your mother's text. Don't say a single word to anyone in your family until I tell you it's time. Understood? I said yes. I hung up. I sent him every document I had. Then I sat in my kitchen in the dark for a long time. Not because I was sad. Because I was trying to locate the last remaining piece of me that still wanted to be wrong about my mother. I couldn't find it. I had been sending money home since I was 24. Not because anyone forced me to. I want to be honest about that. I sent it because I was the capable one. And in my family, capability had always been treated as obligation. My mother never said you owe us. She didn't have to. It was coded into every conversation. Every phone call that started with, I don't want to stress you out, but, and ended with a number. Every time Donna's car needed repairs, or the furnace acted up, or there was a bill that had somehow slipped, I was reliable, so I was the one who got called. I was successful, so I was the one who was expected to share it. I had spent years confusing that pattern for love. I was not the daughter. I was the financial backstop. And when I had finally stopped being a willing one, when I had quietly reduced my monthly transfers over the past year, when I had started setting limits, they had simply taken what they needed anyway, with my name, without asking. Marcus called me 2 days later. His voice had changed. Claire, he said, there's something you need to know before we go further. I was on my lunch break, sitting in my car in the hospital parking garage. I turned off the radio. The commercial property loan, he said. I had my associate do a full trace on the brokerage chain. The loan wasn't originated by your mother or your sister directly. What do you mean? I asked. The primary contact on the origination paperwork, Marcus said carefully, is a man named Gerald, your father's older brother, your uncle. I sat very still. My Uncle Gerald had not been at a family event in 11 years. The official story, the one my mother had told so many times it had become family myth, was that Gerald had walked away from my grandfather's estate after a dispute over the will, taken money that wasn't his, and cut off all contact out of guilt. My mother had described him variously as unstable, dishonest, and someone who had caused irreparable damage to our family. I had met him exactly twice as a child, and both times my mother had pulled me away before any real conversation could happen. That doesn't make sense, I said slowly. Gerald is. My mother told us he was completely out of our lives, that he'd moved to BC and had no contact with anyone. He's in Calgary, Marcus said. He has been for 4 years. And Claire, I need you to hear this carefully. I ran a background check. Gerald has no criminal record. He has no civil judgments against him. He is a retired chartered accountant. He has been living quietly in Inglewood, and he's been trying to reach you through a third party for the past 18 months. The hospital pager on my hip went off. I silenced it without looking at it. He's been trying to reach me? Through a former colleague of your father's, Marcus said. Someone named Doug, who apparently made several attempts to pass along Gerald's contact information to you directly, but you never received them. A pause. I think you know why you never received them. I did know. My mother screened everything that came through the family. She had done it my whole life. Gently, consistently, always with a good reason. That person is toxic. That one has an agenda. You don't need that stress. She had curated my entire perception of my own family. Is he willing to meet? I asked. He's waiting, Marcus said. He says he has documents. He says he has had them ready for a long time. He says, and I'm quoting him directly here, I was waiting until she was ready to find out the truth. I drove to Marcus's office that evening after my shift. I hadn't eaten. I hadn't changed out of my work clothes. I walked into the meeting room and there was a man in his late 60s sitting at the table with a leather folder in front of him and the kind of stillness that comes from a person who has been waiting, genuinely waiting, with patience that has had years to settle for a conversation they knew was eventually coming. He looked like my father. The same jaw. The same careful way of holding his hands. Claire, he said. He didn't stand immediately. He waited, like he was letting me decide how much space to take up in the room. I sat down across from him. My mother told me you stole from the estate, I said. I wanted to say it out loud, clearly, before anything else. Not as an accusation. As a fact I needed addressed. He nodded slowly. I know what she told you, he said. She's been telling that story for 11 years. He opened the folder and turned it toward me. Inside was a copy of my grandfather's original will, notarized, dated, and witnessed. Beside it was a buyout agreement with a signature that was meant to be Gerald's. That signature is not mine, he said. I had it analyzed by a document examiner in 2016. The forger was not careful. Your grandfather intended to split the estate evenly between your mother and me. She arranged a buyout without my knowledge, signed my name, transferred the assets to herself, and then built a story around my absence to explain why I wasn't there to contest it. He let me sit with that for a moment. Then he continued. I didn't fight it publicly because I didn't want to take a legal battle to your door when you were 14 years old, he said. Your mother knew that. She counted on it. He paused. But I've been watching from a distance. I watched her do to you what she did to me. I watched the money go out every month. I watched the business ideas your sister cycled through. I watched what they built on your back. He looked at me steadily. I couldn't step in and rescue you, Claire. Not while you were still paying willingly. It would have just pushed you back toward them. So you waited, I said. Until you started pulling back, he said. When the transfer slowed down, I knew. I knew they would escalate. And when they escalated to fraud, I knew you would escalate. And when they escalated to fraud, I knew you would finally be ready. I thought about the last 18 months. The month I had quietly reduced my transfer from $1,500 to $800. The month after that, when I stopped entirely. The 2 calls from my mother, not angry, just tired, just concerned, just wondering if everything was okay with me. The loan had been opened 6 months after I reduced. The second line of credit, 3 months after I stopped. They hadn't panicked. They had simply updated their source. My uncle reached into the folder again. He pulled out a single sheet and placed it in front of me. When your grandfather's estate was settled, fraudulently, your mother gained control of a family trust that has been generating income for the past 11 years, he said. She has been drawing from it quarterly. What she does not know is that when my father originally established that trust, he included a clause. He added it because he knew your mother. A small, sad pause. He loved her, but he knew her. He tapped the page. The clause states that if any beneficiary of the trust is found to have engaged in fraudulent conduct against another family member, specifically fraud involving a family member's identity or financial standing, the trust is to be immediately dissolved and the remaining assets transferred to a designated secondary beneficiary. I looked at the page. I looked at the designated secondary beneficiary line, my name. He put your name there 9 years ago, Gerald said quietly. When you graduated from nursing school, he told me it was because you were the one who was going to need protecting eventually. He closed the folder. He was right. The next few days were a specific kind of quiet that I can only describe as the calm you feel in a hospital hallway after a code, after the noise stops and everything becomes very clear and very focused. Marcus's team moved fast. Credit freeze confirmed on all 3 bureaus. Police report filed for identity fraud. Emergency injunction prepared, targeting all assets held in my mother's name pending the fraud investigation. Then my phone rang. I was at home, standing at my kitchen counter. It was my mother's number. I let it ring out. 20 minutes later, she was at my building's intercom. I live on the 9th floor of a condo building in the Beltline neighborhood. The intercom system shows a camera feed. I watched her standing in the lobby in her winter coat. Her hair not quite right, the way it gets when she hasn't slept. She looked smaller on the camera than she ever had in person. She had always been the kind of woman who filled a room with authority. The volunteer committee chair, the church group organizer, the one who always knew what was appropriate and what was not, and made sure everyone else knew it too. On that camera, she just looked like a tired woman in a coat. I buzzed her up. I made that choice deliberately, not because I owed her the conversation. I didn't. But because I needed to be the one who said it directly. I needed to hear myself say it out loud. She knocked. I opened the door but did not step back. Claire. She exhaled my name like she'd been holding it in for days. Her eyes were red. She reached toward me. I didn't move. You have to stop this, she said, her voice already thickening. Whatever Marcus is doing, whatever Gerald has told you, sweetheart, you have to understand that man has been poisoning people against me for years. He is not what you think he is. I've seen the document examiner's report, I said. My voice was level. I had practiced being level. From 2016, the signature on the buyout agreement isn't his. A flicker behind her eyes. Fast. She recovered quickly. Those reports can be paid for. Gerald has resources, Claire. He has a motive to discredit me. After everything I did to rebuild, after your father passed, after everything I sacrificed to keep this family together. I've also seen the trust documents, I said. Grandpa's original trust, with my name in it. The flicker again, slower this time to disappear. You don't understand the full picture, she said. Her voice had shifted slightly, the warmth still there, but something harder underneath. What we did with the loan, it was temporary. Donna has a real opportunity this time. A real lease. She just needed the backing, and you have a good salary. You have good credit. It wouldn't have affected you. You forged my signature on a $385,000 loan, I said. It was for the family, she said. The warmth was mostly gone now. You used my SIN number, I said. You opened 2 lines of credit without my knowledge. You have been drawing from a trust that was obtained through a forged buyout, and when I stopped sending money voluntarily, you moved to taking it by force. I let that sit for a moment. What I'm doing isn't stopping a family disagreement. It's stopping a crime. She stared at me. Her face did the thing I had watched it do my entire life. The small recalibration. The search for the angle that worked. The new mask to try on. There were several attempts. The tearful mother. The wounded matriarch. The righteous indignation. None of them held. What was left was just her face. Tired and exposed and refusing, even now, to apologize. You will regret this, she said quietly. I already regret a lot of things, I said. This isn't going to be one of them. I handed her the documents Marcus had prepared. The injunction. The police report reference number. The trust clause, printed clearly on the last page, with my name highlighted. Then I stepped back. I closed the door. Not hard. I didn't need the emphasis of a slam. Just firmly, cleanly, the latch catching with a sound that felt like punctuation. I stood in my hallway for a moment. Then I went to my kitchen, put the kettle on, and called Marcus. She came to the building, I said. I know, he said. The building sent a security notification to the file. We'll log it. Are you okay? Yes, I said. And I meant it. Not in the way you say it to end a conversation, but actually. The hearing took place at the Court of Queen's Bench in Calgary on a Thursday morning in January. It was cold. The kind of cold that makes the air feel thin and bright. The kind of Calgary winter day where the sky is a hard, metallic blue and your breath fogs immediately when you step outside. I wore my good wool coat. I felt very calm. Donna and my mother had retained a lawyer, a pleasant-looking man who spent the first 20 minutes attempting to frame the situation as a family financial misunderstanding compounded by communication failures. He used the phrase best intentions 4 times. He suggested that the guarantor documentation had been completed in good faith with the belief that I had verbally agreed at some prior point. Then Marcus stood up. He did not raise his voice. He presented documents the way I imagine a surgeon would, cleanly, in sequence with no wasted movement. First, the forensic handwriting analysis of my forged signature compared to my actual signature on file with 2 separate government documents. The divergence was not subtle. Second, the credit bureau record showing the timeline of account openings, each one corresponding precisely to a period when my voluntary transfers had decreased or stopped. Third, a financial reconstruction of the family trust, showing 11 years of quarterly disbursements to my mother from an estate that Gerald had been fraudulently bought out of, supported by Gerald's sworn affidavit and the original notarized will. Fourth, the trust clause, black ink on white paper, fraudulent conduct against a family member, dissolution, transferred to designated secondary beneficiary. The judge, a woman in her 60s who had the expression of someone who had heard every possible version of every possible story, looked at the documents for a long moment. I want to be precise here, she said, looking at my mother's lawyer with something that was not warmth. The position of this court is not that there was a miscommunication. The evidence before me indicates a sustained and deliberate pattern of financial fraud conducted using the complainant's identity. The attempt to characterize this as a family matter in need of mediation is noted and rejected. She delivered the judgment in 4 parts. The commercial loan was declared null and void with respect to my liability. My name was to be removed from all associated records. The credit bureau would be formally notified and my file corrected. The fraudulent lines of credit were similarly severed from my name. A civil judgment was entered against Donna and my mother jointly for the full amounts drawn. A referral was made to the Ontario Securities Commission regarding the trust documents for independent review of the original estate settlement, given the evidence of forgery, and the family trust, the 11 years of quarterly payments, the remaining principal, was to be frozen pending the OSC review, with my designation as secondary beneficiary recognized as valid and enforceable upon the conclusion of that process. My mother's face, when the last item was read, was very still. Not the stillness of someone who is composed, the stillness of someone whose internal scaffolding has just given way and who has not yet worked out how to stand without it. Donna was crying beside her. I looked at her for a moment. I had spent years feeling guilty about Donna, her failed ventures, her instability, the sense that I should be helping her more. I had told myself her failures were bad luck, circumstance, the randomness of things. Watching her cry in that courtroom, I understood finally that her tears were not for the fraud or the harm she had caused. They were for the lifestyle that was already ending. I let go of the guilt cleanly, the way you release a breath you've been holding without realizing it. After the hearing, Gerald was waiting in the hallway outside the courtroom. He was wearing a gray wool sweater and holding a coffee cup, and he looked like someone's grandfather waiting outside a school. He handed me a second coffee without saying anything. We stood in the hallway and drank our coffees. "It's done," I said. "Yes," he said. "I want to ask you something," I said. "Honestly, go ahead. When you put my name in that trust clause 9 years ago, did you know this was how it would end?" He was quiet for a moment. "I knew your mother," he said, "and I knew what she did to the people she loved when she felt them starting to leave." He looked at me. "I didn't know exactly how or when. I just knew you'd need something solid to stand on when the ground went out." I thought about that on the drive home. I thought about my grandfather, a man I remembered mostly as a presence at holiday dinners, a quiet man who made very good coffee and always asked me how school was going with what felt like genuine interest. He had seen something in me at 22 years old that he thought was worth protecting. He had made a document. He had put my name in it. He had trusted that eventually I would find my way to it. That night, I sat at the same kitchen table where the default notice email had arrived 6 weeks earlier. My laptop was open. The Equifax report was pulled up, and for the first time in 2 years, every line on it was mine. No accounts I didn't recognize, no balances I hadn't built, no debt I hadn't chosen. My phone had 17 unread messages. I read none of them. I opened a folder on my desktop, the one I'd been building since the first call with Marcus. Every document, every bank statement, every screenshot, every piece of paper that had turned my family from a family into a case file. I looked at it for a moment. Then I selected the whole folder, moved it to the trash, emptied it. The laptop screen reflected back just my own face. I had spent most of my adult life sending money south, keeping people afloat, being the one who could handle it. I had told myself it was love. In some version of myself that I no longer recognized, I think I had believed it. But love doesn't forge your signature. Love doesn't drain your credit while you're working nights saving strangers. Love doesn't use the words just paperwork to describe a $385,000 fraud. What I had been doing wasn't love either, though. That's the part I hadn't let myself sit with before now. Every transfer I'd sent had not saved anyone. It had delayed the reckoning. It had kept the system running. I had been the fuel in an engine that was always going to crash. I'd just been choosing not to see where the road was going. There's a line I've heard used in trauma debriefs after difficult codes. You can't resuscitate someone who doesn't want to survive the truth. I had been performing CPR on a version of my family that had never really existed, a version where the love was unconditional, where the calls were about connection and not transactions, where my success was a source of pride instead of a resource to be harvested. That family had never existed. I couldn't mourn it anymore because I couldn't miss something I'd never actually had. Gerald and I had dinner that Friday at a small Italian place in Inglewood, close to where he lived. He told me about my father, things I hadn't known, stories from when they were young, before everything went sideways. He had a good laugh, my uncle, a quiet one, like something was funny to him on a level slightly below the surface. He didn't offer me anything, no gesture, no key, no sweeping restoration. I was glad. I didn't need one. I had enough now. The fraud severed, my name clean, the trust process underway, and the first real conversation I'd had with a member of my father's family in more than a decade. That was enough to start with. On the drive home, I crossed the Elbow River with the windows down a crack, despite the cold, because I'd been inside all day and I needed the air. The city was lit up in the dark, the way Calgary gets in January, sharp and clear and very bright. I felt present in it in a way I hadn't in a long time. Not relieved, exactly. Not triumphant. Just here, unencumbered. There's a thing we tell patients sometimes when they're dealing with a long-term condition they've been managing badly because it's familiar. We tell them that the discomfort of changing is not the same as the danger of staying the same. That sometimes what feels like stability is just a very slow emergency you've gotten used to living inside. I had been living inside a slow emergency for 10 years. I just hadn't called it that. I had called it family. If you've ever been the one in your family that everyone leans on, not because you offered, but because you were capable, and capability was treated as consent, I want you to know that I see it. I know exactly how invisible that weight is, how the system trains you to believe that carrying it is normal, even noble. And I know how terrifying it feels to stop carrying it, because stopping feels like abandonment, even when what you're actually doing is surviving. But here's what I know now. On the other side of it, an obligation that was never actually agreed to is not a debt. It is a theft in slow motion. And the moment you name it clearly, the moment you stop paying it, that's not a betrayal. That's just you, finally, deciding that your life belongs to you. If any of this landed with you, if you've had to draw that kind of line, or you're still trying to find the courage to, tell me about it in the comments. I read them all. And if you know someone who needs to hear this today, please share it with them. Sometimes the right story at the right moment is the thing that helps someone finally see clearly. Thank you for being here. There's something I've been thinking about since the hearing. Not the judgment, not the numbers, but the folder Gerald placed on that conference table. He had been carrying those documents for 11 years. He hadn't acted impulsively or out of anger. He had simply prepared, quietly, and waited for the moment when preparation would actually matter. That kind of patience isn't passive. It's a form of intelligence most people underestimate because it doesn't make noise. I think about the contrast between that and what my mother built. She built something fast and loud and convincing, a story that held for over a decade, a version of events so thoroughly repeated it became the only version anyone in our family knew. But it was built entirely on what other people didn't know, didn't check, didn't question. The moment someone looked carefully, it came apart. Speed and performance aren't the same thing as strength. What looks like power from the outside can be the most fragile structure in the room. What I keep coming back to is the cause and effect of the whole thing. Not in a mystical sense, but in the very plain, observable way that actions accumulate over time and eventually produce an outcome that matches them exactly. My mother spent 11 years drawing from a trust she obtained through forgery. She spent years using my name, my credit, my reliability as a tool. Every one of those choices was a small pressure applied to something that was eventually going to give way. When it gave way completely. The loan default wasn't bad luck. It was the logical end of a decade of decisions, and honestly, my own choices were part of that chain too. Every month I sent money without asking questions. I was choosing comfort over clarity. I told myself it was generosity. I told myself it was keeping the peace. But it was also avoiding the truth I already half knew. That avoidance had a cost, and I paid it. The difference is that I learned something from mine, and I stopped. Claire didn't fail because she was weak. She succeeded because, at the moment that mattered, she chose to be honest, with herself first, then with the situation. She picked up the phone and called the right person instead of trying to manage it quietly. She stood in a doorway and said no out loud for the first time in her adult life. Those aren't dramatic gestures. They're small, precise acts of integrity performed under real pressure. And those are the acts that actually change things. The story doesn't end with a windfall or a perfect resolution. It ends with a woman sitting at a kitchen table with a clean credit report and a deleted folder and the quiet, specific freedom of a life that belongs entirely to her. That's not a small thing. That's the whole thing. If there's one idea I want to leave you with, it's this. The capacity to act clearly when it's difficult, not perfectly, not without fear, but clearly, is something you can build. It's built in small moments long before the crisis arrives. Every time you tell yourself the truth about something uncomfortable, every time you hold a boundary that costs you something, every time you choose accuracy over approval, you're building the person who will be able to handle it when the real test comes. Claire could stand in that doorway because she had already made the decision inside herself. The door closing was just the last step of something she had been working up to for years. That's how it actually works. Not luck, not timing, just the slow, honest accumulation of who you're choosing to become.